Today, we observe Veterans Day. In doing so, we take time to come together as a nation, express our gratitude and honor those who have served, and those who continue to serve on our behalf in the armed forces. I'm Taylor Rothman, a senior at Hoover High School in North Canton, Ohio.
And I'm Jacob Scafidi, a junior. The end of World War II brought a beginning of a new war, the Cold War, an arms and political race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States believed that the Soviets were close to developing an atomic bomb of their own, and the Soviet Union began installing communist-leading governments in Eastern European countries that they had liberated from Nazi control during World War II.
An iron curtain has descended across the continent.
As a result, the United States, along with other Western countries, feared that communism would spread worldwide. To prevent this from happening, the U.S. launched a campaign to stop the spread of communism. The campaign began with a war from 1950 to 1953 in Korea, where the U.S. helped prevent South Korea from being taken over by North Korea.
This would cause the U.S. to draft nearly 1.8 million young men into the military and ask them to do things that they most likely had little to no experience in. One of these young men was Ted Mathies.
I was born in 1948 in Akron, and I think I was 4 when we moved to Cuyahoga Falls. I started working when I was 12. So between school and working after school, I stayed pretty busy. My dream was to be a welder, do something with my hands, to create something. Got out of high school, and sure enough, I was a welder for 3 years before I got drafted.
In the 1950s, people strived to fit into society and adhere to traditions. However, in the 1960s, the baby boomer generation led a counterculture movement. Young people stopped trying to fit in, and tradition was not of much importance. This movement created a more liberal generation and the rejection of conventional social norms.
Men started wearing their hair longer, people began to wear tie-dye, and many became more carefree than before. Also, this generation listened to very different music than their parents. The often drug-promoting music caused a drug epidemic across the nation.
Along with the counterculture movement also came the civil rights movement. Across the country, there was racial strife and riots were taking place. Many groups, like the Black Panthers, were unhappy about the racial inequality in America. People like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks protested and fought for the equality of African Americans. Some of these issues carried over to Vietnam.
But that time period, the late 60s, obviously I was aware of things that were going on in Detroit, in Chicago. I worked for a company, Massey Ferguson, and they had just moved from Detroit because of all the riots. And I heard a lot of stories about what was going on up there. But I didn't really focus in on the detail or the why. I probably couldn't today tell you the exact why.
The Vietnam War was not a very popular war here in America. That is because not many people actually understood the background of the war and America's reasons for fighting. Many people in the counterculture movement saw the war as American aggression and believed that America had no business being in Vietnam. Many believed that the government drafted more people of color and people who came from lower income families compared to other groups.
It's a very difficult war to understand. Things that changed through the war that makes it so difficult for people to understand is presidents changed, politics changed, tactics changed, the army, the military changed. MacArthur put troops into Vietnam in 1947 as advisors, and the communists were sending out teams to all the little different countries. The reason for being there got lost early on. Some people say we lost the war, but it wasn't our war. The South Vietnamese were fighting for their freedom and we were helping them. No different than 1776 and before when we were fighting for our freedom here. Many other countries helped us. They didn't win the war, we won the war. When I got drafted, the process was when you got out of high school, you had to sign up at the draft board. And at that time, there was no lottery. I don't know what determined on who or what they called up, but that's the way it happened. So that was it. You had choices. You know, you could go to Canada if you wanted. You could go to prison if you wanted. You know, a lot of people went to college. A lot of people got married just simply to get out of the draft. I was 20 when I got drafted and 21 by the time I got to Vietnam. But looking in the field over there, looking at the people that I served with, there were a few that were 19. That's what I remember and what I actually saw. You know, some of the reporting, I don't know if it's biased. I have concerns about how Vietnam got reported in the first place. Basic training was quite the deal for me. I went through a week of orientation at Fort Knox. Got assigned to a basic training company, and the third day they pulled 7 of us out and said, "We need medics. You're going to Fort Sam Houston." They handed us airplane tickets and said, "Be on the plane in the morning." That was the end of my basic. They flew us all the way there, okay? And then the morning we got there, they said, "Well, we're on Christmas break."
Not only did Mathies have to find transportation to Ohio, he had to find his own way back to Fort Sam Houston. Upon his return, training intensified due to a need for medics in Vietnam. In fact, they knew what their future held even before training began.
90% of us, our names were on the board for Vietnam the first week we were there. So that made us a little more rowdy. But given abbreviated training, we had a lot of homework. You know, we had anatomy and we had pharmacy, we had suturing, you know, we had all the disciplines. Okay, but it's like one day of this, a half a day of that. Today you're trying to figure out what it was that you were supposed to learn yesterday. So that was challenging for me a lot to absorb in a very short period of time. We landed at Ben Hoa. I'm now in a war zone. I don't know what to expect. Plane came to a stop on the tarmac and I looked out the window. I see an Air Force guy sitting on a tow motor with his feet propped up on the dash drinking Coca-Cola. That's not what I expected. You know, I didn't know if I was going to be shot at getting off the plane. Everybody had a different picture. It was hot, it was humid. There was very little breeze there. Went to what they call P training from there. It's called preparatory training. You got a new issue of fatigues. You sat through classes about Vietnam. You went out in a secured section of jungle and you got jungle training there. Then they sent us to the 90th replacement depot. We stayed in a tent there along with a lot of other soldiers that were coming in from all over. And every morning at 8 o'clock, we would have a formation outside the camp there. And they would come out and read names. And they would say, "You're going to the 1st Infantry. You're going here. You're going there." I didn't get called the first day. Second day out, they didn't call my name. Third day out, my name was the first one called. They said Mathies, Ted S. They said local, and I went, "Yes." And they said 82nd Airborne, and I went, "No." So I went from a high to a low very quickly. And I was transferred from there to Phu Loy, from Phu Loy to Tan Son Nhut, which is where the rear area of the 1st to the 505th was. And I got my aid bag. I got some additional training there from the members and specialists that were working in a rear aid station. This is not training anymore. This is what you need to know. This is what you're going to do. A lot of advice, not only in helping me pack my aid bag for what I was going to be dealing with, what medicines I was going to need and how to use them, and particular types of bandages and things to do that was more along the lines of reality. It's not a general focus anymore. Now it's specific. You know, I'm not going to be taking care of sick people. And then I was sent to the field I remember the day I sat at the helipad. I sat on a skid load of sea rations, and it was drizzling rain, and it was foggy. And a helicopter came in, and they loaded the sea rations, and I got on. I didn't see the ground till we were probably 20 feet off of the ground. And we landed in the mist, in the rain, and all the soldiers are wearing their ponchos, sitting in the rain, and I did the same thing, and that was Welcome to Vietnam. Probably my third combat assault, and I see the guy in front of me probably 15 yards. I saw him grab his leg and he spiraled down. I froze. This is it. You know, we're under fire. I now have a wounded soldier, and something caused me to move from a stalled state. So I stayed low to the ground. I opened my aid bag, crawled on up to the soldier, and feeling for the hole, the exit wound, and getting an ace wrapped around that, all trying to lay down. This is the first time I've been doing anything for real, and second guessing myself on everything I do. About the time I think I'm finished, somebody walks up to me and says, "Okay, Doc, it's clear." So then I raised up, cut the rest of his pants off. I saw what I really had an injury, put a tourniquet on, put a new bandage on, and from that point on, I realized that I cannot stay in a prone position to treat an injured person. And every injured person after that, I sat up on my knees so that I could address the wound. But every time I sat up to treat somebody, I had covering fire. I didn't have to ask for it. It was there. Obviously it was needed, and that's why I'm here today. So a lot of guys took care of me. Some medics are conscientious objectors. They don't believe in killing. But I don't believe in killing as offense. To defend something is I have a different view of that. Combat's like dog years. You know, it's 7 to 1. So if you're with somebody a week, it's the same as 7 weeks. If you're with them a month, that's the same as 7 months. The bond begins immediately. You have to put your life in somebody else's hands. You have to have that trust. But, you know, when you're losing, that hurts. You know, everybody is new, replacements are coming in, you don't know anybody. So you do feel somewhat alone or isolated. Then out of survival, you develop this, I'm not gonna allow myself to get any closer, because you or me may not be here this afternoon. We rarely talked about tomorrow. We talked about today. We talked about what we're gonna do tonight, but we almost never talked about tomorrow. I wrote letters back and forth, but I also had a small tape recorder, and we would exchange tapes. I would make tapes and send home, and the family would make tapes and send to me, and that worked really well. The tape recorder was small enough that I could carry it in a small ammo box, watertight in my backpack.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, known as PTSD, is a disorder in which a person has difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. 31% of Vietnam veterans suffer from this condition. Soldiers who were in the heat of combat make up the majority of that group. Mathies, being a combat medic, knows all too well the reality of living with the lasting effects of PTSD.
First of all, no one goes through combat without coming out with PTSD. It affects everybody somewhat different. Okay, there's still a lot of common grounds that we all share. If you think about a broken piece of glass, a shard of glass, grabbing it with your hand and squeezing it, the feeling you get, that's the feeling we get with the memory. Whatever was going on at that time, treating women and children in villages and how they had to live and what we had to treat them with. That plays on. I had to be a priest and a rabbi and a monk mother. Why did Pete die? I have to explain that, okay? And coming from someone that's 21, like, I don't have all the answers. I don't even have a few of the questions yet, okay? And they're asking me for answers. So I think about that. A lot of them had it a lot worse than I did. In California, in Oakland, and San Francisco, if you were in uniform, you were looked down on. The problem is you wore a uniform home from Vietnam. That's all the clothes you had. Some groups shouted things at you, baby killers. You couple those 2 or 3 things together. I go to the VA every month. I talk to a psychologist. In the beginning, I got a lot of worth out of that. Now I'm more in a maintenance mode because PTSD never ever goes away. There is no cure, right? But I have someone I can talk to that understands, okay? And that helps me immensely. It allows me to admit I have a problem. I must always address it, okay? And I've been doing that since 2009. And it's made me a better person. I think too much emphasis on veterans is placed to the combat veteran. That's all people, you know. A combat veteran, it's not about running up a hill and throwing yourself on a grenade. You know, that happens, okay? But every combat soldier owes his life to the truck drivers, to the helicopter pilots, the mechanics, the cooks. And when you think about a veteran and someone says, well, I was just a cook. Well, no, you know, I like to eat, okay? So you're not just a cook, okay? You were in a job that was needed, okay? The guy that got me my medical supplies, the people who made that, who packed that, okay? Every veteran is important. That's why it takes 10 soldiers to support one in the field. And we ought not downplay a veteran because, you know, they didn't carry a rifle, they didn't throw themselves on a grenade, you know, and we all try not to do that. But every veteran is important.
Many men and women have served our country not only in Vietnam, but in many other wars as well. These brave people left their lives in America to fight for our freedom and came home with both mental and physical scars. Some were never able to return home to their families at all.
Every veteran is important and deserves our respect. So next time you see a veteran, make sure you thank them for their service to this great nation.